I'm about to show you a clip from Leanna de Bellevue, who is a recovering people-pleasing CEO, describing her experience of prioritizing her business without ever even taking her own wants and desires into consideration. And this is related to her people-pleasing patterns, and you'll see in my breakdown after the clip of why that people-pleasing is super relevant if you yourself have ever felt unsatisfied despite hitting all your business goals. And by the way, this clip is taken from episode 269 of my Joyce Profit live coaching podcast, where instead of interviewing guests on their expertise, I bring on founders and CEOs and then coach them live on air about how their stress patterns are negatively impacting their productivity, delegation, and their peace of mind. So here's the clip and watch my breakdown afterwards.
I take a few weeks at the end of December every year and look at what's next for the business, what's next for our growth, what's next for our people. One thing I don't look at is what's next for me personally. And I think that I will now add that to the agenda, right? Because that's a really big component of. And I think you said something in the review of my assessment, putting the mask on yourself first, right? I don't think that I've necessarily done that. And in those situations, I don't think people realize how close they are to being out of oxygen, right? And I'm not there, but it's now very, very much on my radar. How do I provide for my needs first, and then so that can overflow into everything and everyone else, which might have been what I've been ignoring, thinking that it's not a big deal, right? Just kind of circle back. And now I understand even maybe not addressing that has added to the weight. So even just having this conversation, it feels lighter because I have a plan, right? How do I explore this on this level as well as on a personal level?
Yeah. I'm so glad that that's coming out for you because that's a very common clumping of all of these patterns. So, kind of at the beginning, we talk about the assessment and like, okay, all these people pleasing pieces kind of drove the decision I was making historically. I feel like I'm on the cusp end of that. So now I'm moving into a different space. One of the ripple effects of people pleasing is if your history is one where you grow up and that is like the primary way in which you survive. And what I mean survive here is like this is how I learned to navigate the world. It was effective for me, etc. I could tune into what other people needed. I made sure to give it to them, make sure I was like, that's how I kind of got ahead, right? That's how a lot of these patterns end up starting. Like, yes, that is very good in certain scenarios because it kind of gets you ahead. And it does it at the cost of, well, what is it that I actually want? What are my needs? If I don't have to put everybody and everybody else and I don't have to carry their burdens on top of my own, then like who am I really beyond that? Which is why whenever I'm working with somebody that's in the thick of those people pleasing issues, the first kind of mental model we work through is like people pleasing is fundamentally lying. It is saying yes when internally I mean no. And sometimes when you repeat that long enough, it's like you don't actually even know that like the internal part of me is saying actually no. I don't actually know my truth.
Yes.
And that's the tricky thing about like when you have business owners that then get to a level of success where they now have the financial and the time and the choice space to explore this, you get to this weird precipice where like I don't actually even know, like you said, what it is that I want because I've spent a lifetime ensuring other people get what they want. And it served me well, so like why would I stop it? And then the funny thing is not the funny. The tricky thing is that the people within your precipice right now, like having come out of these patterns, you're in a good spot because you kind of have a clean slate to move towards this, like I said, this 3.0 version of you. And if you move into the 3.0 version of you without addressing the historical patterns that have got you here to begin with, you always run into the risk of sabotaging it.
Yes.
Right? And that really is your game to play right now. Yes, part of it is clarity, And then part of it is just having a new normal where like my needs, my oxygen mask is the primary driver to decisions that I make. Is what I talk about, like having your business fuel your ideal life, right? Like the business should exist to give you the kind of life that money can't buy. And part of that is being unapologetic about the actual life you want to live and then figuring out what's the source of inputs that my business can provide to give me that output that I ultimately want. So that's kind of the tricky space that people in your situation are going to be dealing with as you go into and explore all this. So I know it's kind of future casting to some degree with regards to where you're at, but just what lands for you with that reflection.
I think it's definitely puts like a kind of a potential red flag. So for me to check in with myself, okay, am I still where I need to be? Am I looking at old patterns? Am I starting to repeat? Or is there something that maybe does feel scary that I'm trying to avoid? So it's really easy to kind of regress back. Um,
Yeah. And then just to kind of draw it back, because that's an astute observation, but to draw it back to like something practical, when I had to repeatedly ask you, no, 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 what is it that you're actually feeling? Okay. This is how smart people get into this kind of tricky situation, which is they've excelled and have seen very real world success off of using their head, which is great. That's part of your gifts. You should go all in on that 110%. And the space that you are entering right now is the space of like neck down. What is it that I want is generally not a logical question. It has logic to support what you fundamentally feel. And you can use, in this instance, Logic is a good app. It's a terrible operating system. The actual operating system is, the emotionality, the intuition. You said mention faith. Like all of those will be components that go into like really deeply answering that question. And that is where those old patterns are going to be blind spots because they've been pushed aside in order to give you the success that you have right now, right? It's like, well, it makes sense. I'm going to do X, Y, Z. It does. And winning a game you didn't want to play isn't really winning at all, which is oftentimes, like I said, the whole sabotage thing and why so many people end up successful. And then like, why is it nobody showing up to my funeral type of situations? And I know you're not there. I'm just kind of using a general example of like how
yeah.
this can get distorted long term. So to bring it back, that thing of what you'd experienced of like, I actually have to like sit down and think and tune in, like, what am I actually feeling? That's a big indicator of that. Like, there's probably a lot of other blind spots that are operating in this space that can interfere with that realization of the 3.0 version of you. So again, what lands with all of that?
Yeah. No, it feels like you don't know what you don't know, right? So just taking the time to maybe treat it like an onion and go layer by layer, right? What does my heart say? What does my intuition say? What does my faith say? And check in with the feelings that come up as I come up with those answers.
Okay, so now that you've seen that clip, what are the big teaching moments, the coaching moments that you can use as a founder and CEO, especially if you are one that struggles with these people pleasing patterns? And it ultimately boils down to the fact that if you have people pleasing patterns in a leadership position, it is going to be a major hurdle to you enjoying the success that you have and or organizing your business and subsequently your life to a fulfilling 2.0 or what I refer to in the clip as 3.0 version of your business, right? I talked to Leanna about your business should be a vehicle that ultimately powers a life that money can't buy. So something where you are craving and wanting more, but fundamentally satiated and fulfilled. So why does people pleasing get in the way of that and create such big friction? Well, number one, as I alluded to in the coaching clip, people pleasing is lying. It is saying yes to the demands of others, the shoulds, the expectations, the obligations, at the expense of what is internally no. So it is lying because to the outside world, I'm agreeing to or saying yes to something, while internally, what is actually true for me is a no. Now, you're not doing this intentionally. This is obviously a subconscious pattern that you have repeated thousands upon thousands of times, because most people-pleasing leaders did not start out wanting to be people-pleasing leaders. This was developed over thousands of repetitions from childhood onwards, as I talk about in the clip, as a way to survive. So when your system, and what I mean by system is like your emotional system, your nervous system, even your psyche, all of that cumulatively operates like a system. So when your system hears and repeats this lying of, I say yes when I mean no, that creates an internal tension. Like, we don't like that. It doesn't actually feel good. Now, you repeat that over thousands of times, what you end up getting is actually disconnection. And this is what we're talking about in the clip from, like, this game is a neck down game. And by only staying neck up, you disconnect from the emotional core, which actually drives the core of your desire. So to answer that question, like, what is it that I ultimately fundamentally want? People pleasing is a pattern that disconnects you from that fundamental, more emotional, intrinsic truth that will be what powers and guides the North Star of, like, where is my business going to go? What would it actually look like to create a business that fuels and powers the ideal life that I want to live, one that I can't buy, meaning I can buy the resources to give me my time back, whether that's, through people or agencies or, automation or whatever. But what I do with that time and how I feel about that time, I actually can't buy that. That is actually the internal game here. So the longer you continue to be fueled by what I call these stress drivers, and these are patterns of thought, feelings, and actions that negatively impact your productivity, delegation, and peace of mind. And people pleasing is one of the 64 that I assess for, which is what Leanne mentioned in the beginning of that clip. When you go through that and you realize that what has been driving me is this stress pattern of people pleasing, the ultimate reality that sits in is, like, you cannot stress your way to peace. So I gotta eliminate that stressful pattern of people pleasing. And what is left over is then the peaceful fuel to create, so to be pulled towards a vision that ultimately aligns with what you like, right? But that starts with reestablishing that connection with regards to what is authentically true for me, right? And this is why that is the right game to play. It is not what should I be doing, what logically makes sense, what's going to make me the most amount of money. It is that logic supporting the ultimate thing that I know how to access, that I want, that I take full ownership and don't dilute or feel guilty about wanting, and then take full, bold, unbridled ownership of, like, this is the thing that I'm going to create. I don't care what nobody else says about it. As long as those people-pleasing patterns are there, it is going to sabotage that in some sort of way. So if you're interested to dive deeper into this topic, you can check out all the other videos on this channel surrounding that. You can join my Substack, which has articles all around these things. And if you want to go through the assessment that Leanne did on my podcast, you can do that either privately or for the podcast itself on the Peaceful Ambitious CEO website. All of that is linked below. Otherwise, subscribe, comment for more content like this.